When I was younger, we frequently visited my grandparents around holidays, even though we didn't live in the same town. My aunt lived 2 houses down from my grandparents. The lady in the house between was creepy. She was a large woman, over 6 feet. She wore logging chains around her neck, a dress and work boots. The only time I remember seeing her outside was either in her garden in the back, or when she was washing the outside of her house, scrubbing the actual building. She did this often. During these times she would yell at us kids and call us all kinds of things. She would tell us the devil would be coming for us. The adults told us to leave her alone and to avoid her. We would run the distance between my aunts and my grandparents, because when you passed by she was watching out the windows. It was creepy and we never went alone. One Halloween, one of the cousins dared us to trick-or-treat her house. I remember how scared I was, but I didn't want to be a chicken. Plus, I was going with the group. One of us rang the doorbell, and there was a lot of banging noises in the house, suddenly like doors slamming. When she answered the door, she had a severed head in her hands, and we all went screaming. The adults told us it was a Halloween prop, and we knew we shouldn't be bothering her, and deserved to be scared. About a month later, my parents got a phone call that the lady had tried to kill my aunt while she was bringing in groceries, and had my young cousin in her arms. The lady had one of them rope saws, and had come up behind my aunt with it. She put it over her head and around her neck and proceeded to saw. My aunt naturally flipped and started kicking the door. My uncle came and beat the lady down with a fire poker. The police investigation revealed that the woman had been digging tunnels under her home, which were coming up under my aunt's, my grandparents' and another neighbor's house. She had been bringing the dirt up and putting it in the raised beds of the gardens. She also had a shrine of some sort underground, which had a few severed heads around it. My aunt survived BTW, but has a long scar across her neck. I don't have any way to verify whether this is actually a family story or whether it's an urban legend, but here. My family has lived in rural Nebraska since they immigrated from Germany in the mid-1800s. Near the turn of the century, disease was pretty rampant in the homesteading area, and it killed off members of almost every family. When someone died from illness, time was of the essence, and burying them is not to let the virus spread from the deceased to the living. This meant no wait periods. So an aunt of some unknown number of grades preceding her relationship to me dies of some disease, and she gets buried in the family cemetery under the homestead. The dogs were very fond of her, so it wasn't too surprising that after the funeral the 2 dogs stuck near the grave. The rest of the family began to think something of it when, a week and a half later, the dogs were still visiting her grave almost constantly. But they weren't just at the grave. They were visibly distressed, frantic, and often barking while there. This goes on for maybe 2 weeks when the family decides to check it out. They dig the casket up and open it. The deceased's hair has all been pulled out. Her fingers are raw and bloody and mangled from where, on the inside of the casket door, they can see deep scratches in the wood. She was comatose when they buried her, and she came to while underground, spending probably her last 5 or so days alive in a buried casket. Okay, this is 100% true, even though most people I tell this to in real life don't believe me. When I was really little, my parents would let me stay up late on the weekends and watch TV until I fell asleep. I really loved these times, and I would stay up later than anybody else just because I could. Well, one night I was almost asleep on the couch when I heard a noise on our front porch. It was the sound of our old-fashioned porch swing moving back and forth. I was a little scared, so I crept toward the bay windows of my living room and peeked out towards the porch. Sitting on my front porch swing was an older woman, probably in her 50s, wearing nothing but a nightgown, covered in blood and holding a huge kitchen knife. I flipped out immediately and ran screaming into my parents' room, but was too terrified to form words. My parents saw that I was upset, but when I finally was able to tell them what I saw, my dad got really angry and told me that it was just a dream and to go back to bed. I refused and kept crying and screaming until he had had enough and snatched my arm and dragged me towards the front door to prove that nothing was there. I kicked and screamed all the way trying to make him stop, but he kept pulling me. Finally we got to the door. He unlocked it, swung it open and said, "See, there's nothing there." To this day, I have never seen the look of fear and shock that was on his face when that woman turned and stared at both of us and slowly stood up with a knife. My dad slammed the door shut and got my mom to call the police while he went and got his gun. He went back to the door with a 12 gauge and cracked the door enough to stick the barrel out. He asked her what she was doing and she said, "Somebody killed my husband, but it wasn't me." My dad told her that the police were coming, and she freaked out, grabbed a knife and walked away. The police found her 15 minutes later trying to break into one of our neighbors' houses. I never slept in the living room again. I may have posted this before, but I'm not sure. I moved into my current home 3 years ago. We originally planned to not have a TV in the bedroom and have a cool hangout spot in the main living room, and the kids had a separate den. This worked out well for maybe the first 6 months to a year. I started to not like watching TV at night in the living room. There was something wrong with the lighting in there, and it just bothered me. It felt like the normal shadows in there were constantly moving. After a few weeks of just being quiet about that and the weird bumps and noises, I finally said something to my so. He seemed relieved that I could see it too. It always looked like someone was walking back and forth behind us when we were on the couch, and sometimes we'd see the silhouette of something reflected on the TV. Now we avoid the living room at night, but have noticed a weird dark shadow in the shape of a tall person in our bedroom doorway. It never fully comes into the room, but it really creeps us out. Our pets react to it too. When I was 13, I moved into my brother's bedroom, as it is an extension to the original house with an ensuite and is far larger than my old room. Originally, it was a tiny box room with the entrance to the attic, but was extended outwards. The attic entrance is always open, with a permanent set of metal ladders angled up into it. There's a picture of it here. The grey arch is where the original room ended. Within a few weeks of moving in, I'd wake up in the middle of the night to see a figure staring down me, with a white head like a skull and formless black body. It would slowly move down to the foot of my bed and stare me until I moved, at which point it would sink into the floor. Just sleep paralysis, right? And I begged to move into the room and had just got it set up so I wasn't going to leave. I didn't really talk about it to anyone. It gradually became less frequent over time. 8 years after this, my brother mentioned at a get-together that he used to have a sleep paralysis demon when he lived in that room, half joking, half freaked out way to other people when the topic of them came up. He described the exact same fucking thing. Neither of us mentioned it to anybody else at the time it was happening, so we have no explanation for us both experiencing the same thing. I live in a ground-level studio. My bed is near the window. I reached to turn off the bedside lamp and saw someone in a white hoodie through the gap in the blinds. I went, "What the hell?" and moved closer to get a better look and hopefully scare the creeper off. The person in the hoodie aggressively moved closer and put his face directly into the blind gap. I jumped back and he ran away. Installed a security camera the next day.